Have you ever walked past a big, important-looking building and felt like it's trying to tell you something? Like there's a kind of secret code hidden in its design that connects, say, a modern bank to an ancient temple? Well, you're not wrong. There is a code, and today we're going to learn how to read it.
It all starts with a question you've probably asked yourself at some point. Why do so many of these official buildings look like they were plucked straight out of ancient Greece or Rome? I mean, you see these massive columns everywhere, from Washington, D.C. down to your local city hall. And believe me, that's no accident. It is a very deliberate choice, one that's packed with thousands of years of meaning, all encoded in the shape of a column.
And this is the alphabet of that secret language. Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, Tuscan, and Composite. These are the 5 classical orders of architecture. Just think of them as 5 distinct families, right? Each one has its own personality, its own rules of proportion, and its own unique story. For hundreds of years, knowing these 5 inside and out was the absolute bedrock of being an architect. But you know, these 5 perfect styles didn't just magically appear one day. They had to be defined, organized, and written down into an official set of rules. It's a process called canonization, and it's a really fascinating story of how a handful of ancient ideas became the unbreakable rules of architecture.
Now check out the huge jump in time here. For more than 1,000 years, things were kind of loose. The Roman writer Vitruvius, he identified 4 main types of columns, but it was way later, in the 16th century, that an Italian architect named Sebastiano Serlio published a handbook that literally changed everything. He's the guy who locked in the 5 orders that we still talk about today. So that's what Serlio's book did. It created the canon. It wasn't just, a book of cool ideas, it became the authoritative guide. It was so influential that it basically dictated how architecture was taught for the next 400 years. It turned a style into a system, something you could teach, copy, and try to perfect.
And here's how he made it feel so official. He didn't just invent a new style. No, he was clever. He pointed back to ancient Rome, to these legendary buildings like the Colosseum, and he basically said, look, this composite order, it's been here all along. It's a legitimate part of the family. By giving it a name and a famous ancestor, he cemented its place in the rulebook forever.
And the impact was just enormous. At the most prestigious architecture schools in the world, like the famous École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, you didn't just learn about the orders, you had to master them. We're talking rigorous, painstaking training in drawing, proportion, and history. The orders weren't just a style anymore, they were the very discipline of architecture itself.
Okay, so once the rules were written in stone, a whole new debate just exploded. A real battle of ideas over what these columns actually mean. Because look, it's one thing to know how to draw a perfect Doric column. It's a totally different thing to know why it's supposed to look that way in the first place. And this question really split everyone into different camps. Are these shapes just a beautiful, stony memory of our ancient past? Are they maybe a metaphor for the human body itself? Or are they something else entirely, a pure, cold expression of structural logic that has no story to tell at all?
The debate basically boiled down to 4 main theories. You had the Romantics, like Loos, who believed every temple was just a beautiful fossil of the very first wooden hut. Then you had others, like Chipias, who saw the column as a stand-in for the human body. On the other side were the pragmatists, like Viollet-le-Duc, who said, come on, it's all about the practicalities of cutting and lifting stone. And finally, the ultimate rationalist, Durand, who argued all that metaphor stuff was nonsense. It's just a grid. It's just math.
And this clash between Loos and Durand, it really gets to the heart of the whole fight. For Loos, architecture is poetry. The column is a tree trunk, the roof is a canopy. It's all about connecting to our natural origins. But for Durand, architecture is pure science. A column is just a point on a grid. The only goal is efficiency and order, not telling stories. We're talking 2 completely different ways of looking at the world.
The philosophers, of course, had to weigh in too. Thinkers like Hegel and Schopenhauer. They weren't really concerned with huts or grids. For them, the classical orders had achieved something much more profound, a kind of perfect, timeless beauty. They saw it as the ultimate balance of forces and proportion, structural perfection, that you could actually see and feel.
And then you get someone like the great art critic John Ruskin, who just cuts through all the noise. He said, look, it all really just comes down to 2 fundamental feelings. You've got the Doric, which is strong, solid, and it pushes outward, it's convex. And then you have the Corinthian, which is delicate, leafy, and it pulls you inward, it's concave. He suggested that pretty much all of architecture is just a dance between those 2 basic feelings.
So for centuries, architects learned the rules, they debated the meaning of the rules, and they followed the rules. But then the 20th century happened. A new generation of architects came along and decided it was time to just break the rules. And they didn't just ignore the orders, they took them apart and rebuilt them into something totally new and radical.
I mean, just look at Antoni Gaudí in Barcelona. This guy knew the Doric order backwards and forwards. But for his Park Güell, he made these incredible leaning columns. They're way too slender, they flare out at the top and bottom, and they have this raw, almost quasi-barbaric power to them. It's Doric, yeah, but like nothing anyone had ever dared to imagine before.
Or how about Gunnar Asplund in Sweden? For his famous woodland chapel, he used these Doric columns that are just incredibly simple, almost ghostly. He stripped them down to their absolute bare essence, trying to evoke that ancient idea of timber construction. It's almost like he brought Laguierre's primitive hut theory to life, but in this really modern, minimalist way.
But maybe the most shocking, most mind-blowing reinvention of all came from Adolf Loos. Back in the 1920s, there was this huge competition to design a new skyscraper in Chicago, the Tribune Tower. And Loos sent in a proposal that just left everyone's jaws on the floor.
Yep, you heard that correctly. His big idea for a modern skyscraper was to build one single, gigantic, soaring Doric column, completely covered in polished black granite. It was insane. It was both a tribute to the timeless power of this classical shape and a total slap in the face to modern fads. He was basically screaming that this 2,000-year-old form had more integrity and power than any newfangled glass box.
And that's the thing, right? When you get down to it, this whole story proves that a powerful set of rules doesn't have to stifle creativity. It can actually be the perfect launchpad for it. That 2,000-year-old code is still there, just waiting for the next person to come along and figure out a new way to break it, or maybe a new way to write it.